morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well, your weekly source of inspiration, enlightenment, and connection with artists throughout Ireland and the rest of the world, indeed. It's wonderful to have so many people joining us live. And this morning we have people from the States, from Australia. George, hi there. And literally, obviously loads of people in Ireland. But it's starting to reach all sorts of corners of the world, which is a wonderful thing, and particularly in the edited version, which we put on YouTube. And on that point, if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, to our channel there, please do so, because it's a great help to the whole cause. Anyway, this is episode 49, and I'm delighted to have my special guest, Robert Russell, here this morning. Robert attended IADT Dun Laoghaire from 1979, and he specialised in sculpture, but also worked in painting and print. Robert has focused on printmaking since joining Graphic Studio in Dublin in 1988, and is studio director there and master printer since 2007. His work is in the collections of the National Gallery of Ireland, the Chester Beatty Library, and the British Library. He was awarded a prize for painting in the Taylor Art Competition in 1980, and received the Alfred Beit Award and Norah McGuinness Award in 1993. So let's go straight over to his personal studio, I think, or his home studio, and say hello to Robert. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us, Robert.
No problem.
So you're in your home studio, because I know most of your work is done in Graphic Studio in Dublin.
Yeah, I'm in the studio at the moment. We've always had a studio here, myself and Nikki, who's also a printmaker.
Yes.
Although I have worked in Graphic Studio as well, in parallel, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because there are limitations to a home studio.
Yeah, I should mention that Nikki Hayden is an artist who was featured on The Art as Well, episode 20, in October 31st. But we decided to keep a sufficient amount of space so that we wouldn't be accused of nepotism between yourself and herself. But anyway, so she's there, and she's got a studio upstairs. Is that right?
She has indeed, yeah. We met actually in Graphic Studio. I think we were the first wedding ever to go out of Graphic Studio.
The first, but not the last,
but,
maybe, huh?
No, not the last. There are two, I think. But yeah, she works upstairs, and I've got the studio in the garden here. Which we had a shared studio in the house up to a few years back, but we moved things around then.
Okay.
Subsequently.
Okay. And your studio there is, we're going to have a quick look at it. Now, just to explain to everybody, you've got something around your neck there.
Oh, yeah.
Which is either a gun in a holster, or else it's something to do with holding your arm up, is it?
It's my shotgun, yeah. No, yeah, I've had surgery on my arm, and it's demobilized for another few weeks.
So is that your left or right?
My right arm, yeah. My gun hand, as I say, it's just due to wear and tear from working in print and making prints and doing mezzotints and so on, and other things, I suppose.
What do they have to do to fix it, Robert?
Well, the muscle tore along the top here, and they had to reattach it, and then they cut a section of the biceps tendon away and reattached it lower down on the bone.
Okay.
So it'll be back to 95%.
How long will it take?
Probably December, I would say.
Oh, it's a long time.
So, yeah, in 3 months I can start doing strengthening exercises, but before this, I just haven't been able to do stuff. I haven't been able to do messaging for years, and if I take care of myself moving forward, I'll be back to normal. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
does that mean you literally cannot do anything at the moment, or is it just really difficult and you have to use your left?
No, it's all with the left hand at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's one of the reasons that we asked you, or we didn't want to put you through, is taking us on an actual visit of your studios, but that we'd record them in advance. So before we get into your career and so on, let's have a look at your home studio, and then later on we'll look at Graphic Studio in Dublin as well.
So just heading out to my studio. It's out in the garden, which is great actually, because it's nice to have a separate space from the house to work in. It is, I think it's 19 foot by 15 foot. So it's a nice big space, and things are pushed down to the sides now so that I have more working space in the middle. What I have is as you can see, that table there, it's everything's, or most of the stuff that moves out is on wheels. That one will roll in underneath this table, and that can also be moved out if I'm working on heavier kind of metal work and woodwork and so on. But just to start from the door here, I have a plan chest. Above that then is the exposure unit for photopolymer, and then that's the lighting up there, and below it is the unit itself, which is homemade. It's got a vacuum in and it works very well. The loom in the middle is something that I'm just setting up, preparing for somebody. And then the workbench beside that, it has all of my paper underneath it. At the moment, it can be used for all sorts of different things, but at the moment I have the rocker set up here. You can see these are the rockers. This is for making mezzotints. So it's attached to a rocker arm. You can see the arm there, and this is a rocker attached at the end. And there's a plate that I'm rocking at the moment. I haven't been able to do that for a long time, but now I hope to be able to do it again soon. So let me just show you very quickly how it works. If I put that down there, you'll see that what I could do is just rock the whole arm back and forth. It's easily done with even one arm, and the rocker will progress along the plate and texture it with the little pits. There are lots of little teeth on the edge of the rocker, and that gives you a textured plate which can then be burnished into to make the print. This is the drawing table, just storage underneath, books above, and then behind that all of my drawing materials and so on are stored in and around here. The back wall has a large elephant poster that came from Gardens of Earthly Delight in Chester Beatty Library, an exhibition there. Above and around the studio I have these rails so that I can hang up proofs when I'm working. These are, well, one is a print that never really got finished. I don't know what to do with it at this stage still, and the other is just a proof. You can see another press here, or a woodblock press. It's a very small Albion press that was given to me. It's a lovely little thing. Don't use it a whole lot, but I have set it up, and below is a small book press, a little Dana press as well. And these here are parts of a piece that I'm working on. I'm trying to develop a way of working with sculpture and print together. In between, well, you probably see in the back wall, I suppose I should mention them. I do Tai Chi, it's kind of important to me. And these are swords. The wooden ones here are some that I've made. They're practice swords for doing the sword forms in Tai Chi. And then the others are metal ones of different weights and types for doing the different sword forms, and spears here, and what's called the Guandao, which actually belongs to the guy who teaches me. But I'm making one at the moment for myself. It's a more ornate version of it, with the dragon, the traditional dragon, sort of belching out the blade. And at the other end then is this mace. That's the wax version of it. It'll be cast in bronze. And these are the waxes for the dragons. On to my left then is the workbench where I have all of the metalworking hammers and tools, ordinary saws and chisels and so on, planes. Whole range of planes, all the way down to this tiny little one. See this one at the end? That's a little brass thumb plane. It's used for violin making. My brother actually made that. He's a violin maker. And then other tools, stone carving tools here. These are some that I've made for stone carving. I've said the bench can move out, and the device and so on can be accessible more easily then. Along here then we have printmaking. This is my hot plate. There's a plate that's grounded and ready to go. It can be drawn into now with an etching needle to reveal the copper below or expose it to the acid. And above the inks, that's the print, recent print of mine. And here's another one that's a similar size that I'm working on. Let me just roll this table out of the way. And I'll show you underneath then another plate, which again I've been working on now. I haven't been able to work on it for quite a while, but I'll get back to it soon. The etching press is here. I know it looks jammed into a corner, but again, it's on wheels, and if I just pull it, it'll roll out. And then underneath that, we've another smaller bench that can be pulled out and used for cleaning plates and so on. And we've storage, more inks here. And at the end, of course, a drying rack for the prints. And that's the studio. And it's a lovely place to work, looking out at the birds usually, and more recently a squirrel on the tree out there. So that's the studio.
Fantastic. Gosh, you've so many things in there. It's unreal.
It's all squeezed in, all right.
Yeah. You're obviously a man of many parts, because there's, I failed to mention, I think, sculpture, maybe I did, that you did a bit of sculpture, and you still do, I think, don't you? The odd bit?
I do the odd piece. Yeah, still. I would always sculpture was my first love,
yes.
really, and still is, I guess, in a way. And I always am making things. I need to for some reason, and so all those little bronze things. It's just, I love it. I really do.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to have them it all mixed into one studio. Because you have to move everything out, change it all over, and then of course 3D work kind of creates a lot of dust, and that just doesn't mix well with printmaking. But I have another shed outside which has all of the band saws and circular saws and that kind of stuff. We have a guillotine out there for the copper, and a few other tools. Aquatins boxes, it's somewhere else as well. So that kind of work I would generally do in the other shed, cutting wood and so on.
And did I see a guitar or two?
Oh yeah, I played the guitar many years ago. I played the violin as well when I was a teenager, but I don't anymore. Haven't for a long time, to be honest with you.
And tell us about the Tai Chi. Is that a sort of a daily practice of yours?
Well, it should be, but it hasn't always been. But yeah,
lately,
I've done it for, I suppose, 20 odd years, and there are two groups. One friend I have practiced with now. I learned with him one type of Tai Chi, and the pair of us go off to a little hall, and we rent it out once a week, and just the two of us practice in it, and have practiced once a week for about 12 years. And now I'm doing Chen style, which is a different style, and for maybe, I suppose, 8 or 9 years. And I have another two people who, again, we rent a hall on a separate day, and we practice that. Sometimes we go to Phoenix Park and do it there. Which is lovely. Early morning, though. I don't like going out into the public and doing it. But yeah, it's great. I mean, I find that with printmaking, you tend to have a kind of a stoop. I'm straightening myself automatically here now. And Tai Chi has really helped. When I don't do it, I get very stiff in the neck and lock up fairly quickly. So I would always do it 3-4 times a week.
Yeah. And mentioning the park there, somebody told me a little story about somebody who was staying with you one evening, or maybe more than one evening, and came down the next day and said, "You know something, Robert? I could have sworn I heard a lion last night."
That's right. Yes.
That's true.
That's right. And elephants. We had somebody staying with us, and there was a lot of noise from the zoo. A calf was born to the elephants, and they make a huge amount of noise around that. And we were woken up by it. We're quite a distance away, but you can still hear.
So.
I mean, it must be 2 kilometers.
Maybe the wind was blowing in the right direction.
If it's a still night, you'll hear the monkeys, lions, and even the wolves howling.
That must have been a big surprise to your guest.
Yeah. Oh, well, he was very puzzled by it, I must say, but I love it.
Yeah. Now, you're a director of the Graphic Studio in Dublin, and that's obviously a very, very big part of your life. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it all started and evolved?
Well, I as I said, I did sculpture really in college, and then after leaving, I didn't have the resources to put together a proper studio, and I was struggling a bit. And I had a job actually painting dolls' heads for about 5 years. These are character dolls that would have been sold to the tourist market. So they're little plaster heads, tiny little things painted with, lots of different colors. So they produced those for about 5 years. And after that, when the factory closed, I was kind of at a loss, and I ended up getting a job, a kind of social employment scheme in the gallery as an assistant, because the gallery person there kind of knew me and knew I was very handy, and the gallery, I suppose, was built in a shoestring, and there was some finishing to do, and I'd done building work as well with a friend of mine who was a builder. So, and then, I was useful with wood and all the rest of it, and knew about art. So she said, look, come in, work with us, and then you can do a course in the studio as payment kind of thing. So I did a course, did about 6 classes, and I kind of never left, really, I guess. After the stint in the gallery, which was about a year, I ended up being administrator part-time in the studio for another year, and I was paid in paper, for printmaking. It was only a few hours a week. It wasn't, so it wasn't really worth getting the money almost, but the paper was very useful.
Yes.
So and from there on, I just worked there as a member for many years, and eventually started to work, as the visiting artist on the visiting artist project, work with artists.
Yes.
But throughout that period, I would have learned and honed my skills by working with other artists, printing for them, and that's how you learn, I suppose.
And you moved premises, did you? I mean, you didn't start out where you are now.
No, and shortly after I started, I was part-time manager with another guy, Tom Phelan, and when the docks were being developed, we were pushed out effectively, but they did have to pay us because we had a 33-year lease, so we had enough money to buy a building, but we had to go within, I think, 6 weeks or 3 months, I can't remember. So we had to move into a temporary premises. We couldn't find the building that quickly that was suitable. So we moved to Pierce Street Enterprise Centre for about a year and a half. And that was a big move. Just to get the equipment, the presses and everything from A to B was, I think, 23,000 euros.
I'm not surprised, because these are heavy bits of equipment, aren't they?
They are, and there's a lot of it. I mean, when you take 20 plant chests and 14 presses and so on, and all of the other equipment that goes along with it. So I kind of went ahead and myself and Tom put together a little acid room in the corner. It was a much smaller studio, and we moved in there, and in reduced circumstances, let's say, for a period. And then we found the building in North Circular Road and moved there, and it's much bigger. It's 7,000 square foot, and we had lots of space. But again, we didn't have a lot of resources at that point, and so I went ahead and worked on it and built all the benches and got everything ready, and everything arrived on pallets. And then I spent another few weeks just getting it all done and dusted. I think Tom had left at that point and moved to Austria.
Oh, right.
But we only closed for, I think, 6 weeks. Well, we were up and running again then. We didn't have a lift at the time, so that was difficult. But within about a year and a half, we were able to get funding for a lift. And
so you installed that there?
Yeah, I mean, we had lithography presses on one floor, and most of the stones in the basement. You couldn't bring them all up there, So we had a limited access to stones.
Sure. Now I know some of our viewers have been there and have seen it and have done courses and worked there, but I certainly haven't, and I'd love to see it. So you very kindly went in with Nikki and did a bit of filming of the studio. Now it's about 10 minutes long, but it's really worth seeing the entire place. So let's go and have a look at that, Robert, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm coming up to the top floor of Graphic Studio. We have 4 floors. It's altogether 7,000 square feet. And in the top floor here, we've all the printing of etchings and so on, and intaglio prints. And down the end, we have the relief print area. We have the sink where we wet the paper, get it ready for printing. And then row upon row of plant chests. And these are for members. Each has a drawer to store the stuff. We have a print rack here. You can see all the prints. Somebody's editioning there. This is a series of boards to which we can staple prints once they're printed, so they'll dry quickly and flatten at the same time. And it's a very quick way of getting things done. Or otherwise, you can flatten it on the blotters here. We have another large flattener further down, which I'll show you. And then again, another rack, a place for cleaning the plates. And then the lift here. And down the end, we have a quiet area in behind the lift. There used to be maybe space for 3 people to work here. So if you want to do stop-out drawing, whatever it is, you can do it in here. And it's a lovely place to work. But since COVID struck, of course, we have to reduce the number of people in that area. But we'll get it back to normal soon, we hope. And then on the other side of the floor is this big press, what we call the Eagle press. It's the Colombian press. And it's used for, it would have been for type and so on originally, but now it's used more for wood block and so on. On the other side here, just to show you behind me, we have some type, the drawers of type here. And this is the furniture for setting up the type. I don't see any setup here, so I can't show you, unfortunately. But again, we can do a lot of, do our own printing, letterpress printing. Here's the Farley press. This is, again, it's used for letterpress really originally, but we use it for lino and woodcut, and it's great, a great little press for printing those. And now we have, let me have a look. The rollers are over there on the shelf, and then we have etching presses down the middle of the floor. And in between then hot plates. So you get your hot plate and work on a press. And again, several people would share presses or work singly, depending. But because of COVID, we have all these screens up now, of course, and it is, we can't do it in such numbers as we did for the moment. This is the large flattener. So what we have is essentially a box that has a big fan in the back, and then the prints are layered in between these acid-free boards, and the air is drawn through for about 3 days, and when they come out again, they'll be dried and flattened. So we're now on the second floor in the studio, and you can see pillars down the center of this floor. This was a kind of granary building originally for Mountjoy Brewery. It was then subsequently Finlayter's Brewery, and it went through various other incarnations before we got it. So we're down in the screen print area on the second floor. This is our screen drying cabinet here, another plant chest in the middle of the floor this time, but there's a nice surface above it. And we have the screen print tables here. And again, of course, with every print operation, we need a rack for the prints. And then on the other side, we have the exposure unit, which is used for photopolymer, intaglio prints, for lithography, and for screen print, of course. And then we have a newer one, which takes smaller screens. It's really just for screens. It's a great little unit, that. And in the corner here, we have a room let me get the lights on, for screen wash. So we can clean off the screens and so on in here. And then further down, so that's the screen print area. It's quite a small area at the moment, but we have lithography press here, and this used to be where we did all the lithography. It's quite a small area now. Very few people do it anymore. We have the large etching press. The bed on this is, I think it's 8 foot by 4 foot or something. It's really big, and we can get some really nice large prints done on it. Let me see, here's a pair of prints belonging to someone, a pair of plates, which will be printed up, or they must be working on it at the moment. And over here on the wall is one of the lithographs. This here is about 3 foot by 26 inches, something like that. It's one of the biggest probably the biggest lithograph made here on the biggest stone that we have, which is 3 foot by 4 foot. It's by Ethan Murrow. And again, on the other side, we've a much larger print rack here. Very much larger boards, they're 6 foot high, where again we can staple prints straight from the etching press onto this, and they will flatten and dry at the same time. It's the best way of doing them for large prints because they don't fit in the flattener, in the big flattener, so it is kind of essential to have that here. And this is a much larger bench area. It's about 12 foot by 4 foot for doing large prints. Some of these very big prints you tend to work together in teams, and so we need a lot of space. Here's another lithography press. And we have another etching press down here, another Rocha, the second Rocha press, and a printing, an ink up area here for it. And this bench here was made specifically for rolling up for lithography. It's very, very flat, and it means that, on any of the other benches there would be a curve on them, and keeping the glass tight to the roller is very difficult. And we're back to the front end of the studio, where we have the lift, and again a nice quiet area for doing some drawing. And it's nice because you can get away and work on your own in a corner here if you really want to. And then we have the print room. In this room we store all of the studio stock of prints. So it's really a large clean room where we have lots of plant chests, and it also doubles as an exhibition area, and we have meetings and various other things going on in here. It's also kind of like a staging area for exhibitions. You can collect all the prints, framed prints, and send them off somewhere. But we have, since COVID, set up a press here to give us another work area for members, and there are the inks there, another nice big press. And Elka's working away there, we'll just not disturb her. And the computer area. So here we have computers that members can use. There's a scanner there, and they're attached to the printer in the office, so they can print out directly to that if they have to. And this used to be the kitchen and our library of technical books and books in art and printmaking mainly. Again, because of COVID, we can't use this as a kitchen temporarily, but we'll be back into it soon. And so in the meantime, we're using it to do jobs that we would normally have done in the print room. And because we had to put the press in there, we do them here. So tearing down editions, preparing them for framing, and, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to move down to the basement now. This is where we degrease plates, getting them ready for etching. They're washed down in this sink. And in here is there's a big fan above this grating here, and it's where we burn on Aquatins. The Aquatin room. Let's get some lights on here. So the Aquatin room, this is the Aquatin box. It's quite big. It takes, I think, 80 centimeters by almost a meter, not quite a meter. And this is where the aquatinting gets done. Members can store their copper plates, and this is for full sheets of copper. So they come in as 3 foot by 6 foot sheets, and larger for aluminium and plastics and so on. You have the guillotines here for cutting down the copper. So that's the large one. It takes the bigger sheets, 4 foot across. And then we have a small guillotine for doing more, smaller plates, really, I suppose. We have rows of tables. Unfortunately, we have the normal screen dividers that we see nowadays everywhere. And we have the acid room in here. And then down the other end of the studio, there's a graining sink under there somewhere. We have a roller shutter which gives us access. It's a double glass door behind the roller shutter, and it gives us access to the lift from a different angle here. And you can see it allows us to bring in lots of work at one go and just put it straight in the lift and bring it to any floor we need. So that is Graphic Studio.
That is an amazing setup.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a
Huge.
big building, and quite different to the original one where I started. Not the very original, but in Green Street East, which was one enormous warehouse.
Yeah.
And you could see and hear everybody from, no
Mm.
matter where you are. It's there. I think it allows for much more privacy and quiet, I suppose, when working.
Probably.
No.
And how many members do you have?
Oh, would be in around 70, and then we would also have visiting artists coming in to work with us, and of course courses and so on. And so, I'm probably 70, 80 and more people would use it each, or 90 would use it each year.
Wow. And as director, would you facilitate these workshops?
Well, what I do, not so much anymore. I used to teach some of the workshops, and I still do. I mean, the Mezzodint one, I will teach. I would have done the photopolymers, carborundum, and I used to teach etching as well for ages. But now other people do that. I do the management of the place really, and in the general management of the building and the studio itself, bringing in the materials and making sure everything's working properly, maintaining the presses and so on. I would be there to answer any questions from the members and help them with the work and help them with their technical issues. So if they want any advice on print or on what they're doing. And then also I would work with still some visiting artists. That's something that I have done for maybe 10, 12 years to a large extent on my own. But Niamh Flanagan now has come in and is doing that. And it has taken over the visiting artist program and managing those projects. So, which is fantastic. She's amazing. But I would have been the kind of only master printer for many years, and then others worked alongside me. We have a lot of members do printing jobs for us, and Niamh would be above, working with them now. But I would still be working with some of the artists.
Yes. And do you operate as a co-op as such, or is it a commercial entity?
Oh no, it was set up by artists originally to provide the facilities, because it's not easy to have a print studio at home, and nowadays not actually allowed.
Mind you, you're not doing so bad yourself there, though.
Not doing so bad, no, but it took a while. It's like the sculpture studio at the beginning. I wouldn't have been able to afford it. And,
I know, yeah.
So it's they set it up, and originally there's a board of directors who are mainly artists and then outside directors, and then I'm the studio director. I'm not on the board of directors in that way. It's a different executive role, and so they still are the one. They still are the oversight over the studio, and it's effectively membership organization owned by members.
All right. Yeah, very good, very good. Now, there are so many different types of presses and different types of techniques, and I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And because I have no clue about printmaking and so on, it's all a bit over my head. But I'm just wondering, would showing some of your work and maybe the different techniques you used help to explain the type of machines you would have used and plates in order to do that?
Yeah. It would, yeah. I mean, I can talk about the techniques as I go through. Yeah.
Okay. Why do we do that? Because it is quite involved, and it might bring clarity to people who wouldn't be so familiar with the whole business. Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, you take it on from there now.
Okay, so I just put these in first just to show you where I came from. Really, as I say, I mean, I started painting before I went to college, and that's what I thought I would be, was painting with oils and canvas. But when I went to college, I discovered sculpture and printmaking, and I absolutely loved working with the materials. And these three pieces, the one on the left is steel, forged steel, and the one on the right is bronze, and then the one in the middle is a combination of materials. I suppose with these I was looking at form and color and textures and so on, and that's what I love about it, is the materials and the textures and what you can do, and the idea of being able to manipulate so is something that we feel is a very solid thing like steel, and use it. And I think that has influenced the printmaking that I have done since. I was actually dealing with, I suppose, from life drawing, got interested in the body and how it is, the vulnerability of it, and how we are made, like our skull is almost like an armor to us to protect us. And then how we add to that, and you know, the relationship between our bodies and what we, you know, how we clothe it and protection and so on. And then I did do printmaking. I did screen print mainly in college as a kind of secondary subject, and I obviously did some painting as well. But I really saw myself as a sculptor when I left, and when I left, then of course I moved on to begin printing.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on?
Yeah, yeah. So when I started, originally I would have done a few classes, and I made a print of, I think it was the Trout was my first one, a multi-plate colored print, and I used spit bite and that, which allows you to get a kind of tonal range in the printing. But then I was aware that there was a mini print exhibition coming up. This was probably in '89 or something, and I had to make a very small print, and I made that caterpillar. And to do that, you can't really use spit bite on that scale. And so as a result, I just used flat Aquatins and burnished them. And you can see, following that, I made a kind of a series of those. And you can see in the blackberry there, underneath the wasp, how that works. And I think, again, that later on, I realized the potential for mezzotint when I, you know, from working like that with Aquatins.
Okay, so now you've used a few words there that mean nothing to me.
Okay,
spit bite and mezzanine. Is this so that you get a gradation of tone?
Yeah. So do you remember the plate you saw in my studio? I said it's grounded and ready to go. It was a plate with a wax on it, and what you do is you get a needle or other tools and scrape into it and reveal the copper, and that is etched, and it gives you fine lines, generally speaking, but other textures as well. And you can see, for example, in the leaves, those lines, veins going through it, are etched lines.
Yeah.
And then for the tone, we use aquatint, and to do that, we drop a rosin dust on the plate and melt it on. And when you etch it, each spot of rosin gives you a little tiny white spot that's protected, and it gives you a tone when you print it. And the longer you put it in for, the darker it gets. So what you can do, like a watercolor sheet, if you get a watercolor, wet the page and drop ink on paint on it, it will flow out into the water and give you a gradation. And we can do that with acid. So if we cover a plate in the aquatint resin and put water on it and drop acid or paint acid into areas, it will etch more strongly in that area. And as it flows into the water and dilutes, it gets the acid works, you know, less effectively. And
very good comparison. Yeah.
You know, gives you a lovely tone.
Yeah.
But in that kind of, you know, area size, it wouldn't have worked.
Yes. Okay.
And then I moved on. I did a series of those insects, and then I moved on to landscapes. And again, with the insects, you saw I was honing in on an object, and I suppose I was thinking of objects. And again, I think that probably came from the idea of the sculpture, the object of something in front of you, and that's what you're working with. And with these, I'm looking at the first one on the top left. Is a tree, but I wanted to look at elements really of landscape more close up, and the one to the right top, that green hill in the foreground, I see the form of it and the color of it, and it's like the object, you know, to me. I'm using in another technique in here. I'm using the etched line, like we discussed before, but here now I'm using carborundum. And the reason I'm using carborundum is because I suppose I had been used to just using flat aquatints. They weren't working here, and I didn't really want to go back to spit bite because I'd kind of, you know, had been a few years before. And I thought that it would loosen me up. Carborundum is where we get carborundum grit. It's like a sand, mix it into glue and paint it on the plate with a brush. So it's very painterly application and loose. And when you ink it up, then you can print it like an intaglio print. And it kind of, I felt it would loosen me up. When I start a piece, any piece, I tend to go to very careful looking at it and drawing it and working with it. And I have to work myself through a process to get to the looseness that I want to really achieve ultimately. And over this series of prints, there would have been about 30 of them, I guess, over 5 years. I was trying to do that, and you can see on the bottom left, it's looser. I'm reducing the drawing in it, and the bottom right, it's all carborundum, and just that little line of trees is etched. And then, you know, on the next slide would have been one of the latest in this edition. Yeah, so I was kind of trying to achieve, you know, looking at the kind of forms within the image and color and dealing with that without being too tied to the landscape itself, I guess. And I suppose at the end of the day, they become much more abstract.
Yes. As
the next slide probably would show better. So that was one of the later ones I did. And naming prints I find very difficult, and I don't really want to do it, to be honest with you, but you kind of have to, or they get very confused. So this is called Lemon and Limes, and I don't think I helped the confusion, really, considering what I did after this. But it refers to the color, but then, of course, the shape kind of suggests it as well.
Yes, yes.
So then I suppose I continued on doing landscapes, but I was asked to take part in an exhibition on Irish culture. And I thought to myself, well, you know, what is Irish culture to me? And it would have been informed by the Christian Brothers, really, I guess, and at home from my parents. The Book of Kells was much admired. And when I thought back, you know, I think of the land of saints and scholars, you know, farming being important and so on. So I tried to kind of combine those and look at what Irish culture meant to me. So I made a series of 6 prints, and based on a Book of Kells type image. But these are my first set of mezzotints. And again, he was using carborundum in the background. The one on the left, the carborundum, I deliberately allowed it to disrupt the plate on top and interfere with the mezzotint to give that texture. And again, to try and keep it looser looking, though it's a very kind of tightly drawn print. And it gives me an extra dimension where on the right-hand side of that print, the red, it's a different, just gives you differences within the print, I suppose. The one on the left is the farmer, the foot on the ground. The one on the right is the scholar holding the book.
Yes.
And then there were other ones. There was, you know, the saint and the king, and so on.
And how large would these prints be?
Those were about 20 centimeters square, I think.
Okay. Okay.
So there was rocking a plate. I showed you the rocker arm there.
You did.
It takes time, and I said you rock the whole plate and cover it, and that takes time. But then you have to do it 32 times in different directions to get the full texture.
And is that essential, or is it just to get a unique texture?
It's essential. People do it for less time. You can get it looking black in about 10 to 15, but when you start to burnish it, there's no tonal differences. It goes from black to white very quickly.
Okay.
So doing it 32 times, you get a whole range of tone as you burnish back.
Yes.
And what it does is just give you a sandpaper-like quality, but it gives you a beautiful, deep, rich tone, you know.
And is it always done by hand like that, or is it kind of being
machined? You can get machine rock plates, and I have got them in the past. They're very expensive, but I would always, they're quite mechanical looking quite often, and I would tend to rock go over it 5-10 times myself anyway. You know,
yes.
I rather do it myself. I find it
hand.
nicer.
Yeah. Very interesting. Shall I go on?
Yeah. Yeah. So at some point, I think it was 1998. Some people from Graphic Studio approached the National Gallery and suggested an exhibition. of prints based on work within the gallery collection. I suppose it would have been maybe 3 years after the Caravaggio was first displayed, but the brief was to make a print based on a work or inspired by a work from the collection. And I had been rocking a big plate. I had finished that set and decided, well, I'm going to make a big plate now. You know, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. It would have been about 50 centimeters by 40 kind of size, or 45.
Yeah.
Or sorry, 40, yeah. And I'd been rocking the plate, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And then this came up, and I said, well, I know that I'll make a mezzotint for this. And Caravaggio, I admire Caravaggio. One of my favorite pieces is his Medusa, because of I suppose it's the three-dimensionality of it, and of the surface, the shield. So I said, I looked at the Caravaggio and moved in on an area of form and color that I liked, and decided to make this. It is carborundum again in the background, so 2 carborundum plates, and I found, of course, that it interfered with the printing of the last plate. So I didn't want it in this case, so I had to put in a blank plate in between to kind of soak up the extra ink and then print the mezzotint. But I got very worried halfway into this when I realized the amount of burnishing and work there is involved in it. But it worked out in the end. It's as much work burnishing as there is rocking, you know.
It's really, yeah. I mean, it's a fabulous piece, because just the contrasts are very, very typical Caravaggio, of course.
Yeah. I suppose for me, I feel that you know, the work was done in that the painting was made first, you know, and it's almost like just taking a section of it and copying it what it is. Yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. Beautiful piece. Yeah.
And then Chester Beatty Library asked me for a copy of it, which was really a lovely thing, and they have it in the collection.
That's in their collection. Wonderful. Oh, well done. Well done. Yeah. Okay.
And from there, I felt the mezzotint is what I want to do, and I decided I'd work towards an exhibition, and these are what I call my fruit and veg period. I started using, rather than use the carborundum in the background, though I did mix in some carborundum in some of them, I used Aquatins. So they would be made from maybe 3 or 4 plates, some Aquatint, and then 1 or 2 mezzotint plates on top. And the reason for that was that rocking the plates was so laborious, and I found it difficult on the arm. But these are small. They're about, most of them are 15 by 20, and some are smaller than that. I think they're 12.5 by 15.
And what's the most number of plates that you'd use? I mean, you know, in normal printing, it would be 4 plates, wouldn't it?
No, I mean, well, yeah, it would be. I mean, a lot of people just use one and will ink up all sorts of different colors in one plate.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but to get that layering up of ink, you have to obviously use at least 2, and most people would use 3, and it's kind of red, yellow, bluish, or blacky blue. Some will use 4. You know, have a dark plate on top.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be those colors, of course, but you know what I mean. It's
yeah.
Because if I were to try and put, see the one in the top left, there's purple and yellow beside each other. If I put those onto a plate and wipe them and wipe it away, the process is to ink up the plate, get it into all of the grooves, marks, and so on, the scratches in the plate, and then wipe it. And that wipes away the surface and leaves the ink in those marks.
Crevices.
And of course, the purple would wipe across the yellow and vice versa, and it would be extremely difficult to do. So having it in 2 different plates is fine. I probably made 1 plate of yellow and red at the bottom and wiped those, because there's a division between them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes. Okay,
And there are I made a good many of these. Originally, this series, I had thought, well, if I'm having an exhibition, I have to have a theme. It's called Hermes, and it represents some of the Greek gods, and that was the kind of theme that I wanted to do. The pomegranate, there was one of an apple Hesperides, and they were to represent different themes, I suppose.
Yeah.
But eventually I made those two, I think, and I thought, no, I just want to make fruit and veg, and kept going and made a series of just a very detailed look at I guess, fruit. The one that,
sorry, Robert, I was just going to say, how many editions would you have printed for these, or are they one-off?
Oh, these I printed 35, I think, of each print. That's the beauty of printmaking. You can make more than one copy.
Yeah.
And the bottom one, the grapes, I was then commissioned by the Behaviour and Attitudes to make 3 prints for their annual collection. Graphic Studio has been commissioned by them for over 30 years now, every year, to make a series of prints. And there were 3. The grapes one is one of those 3. And immediately that exhibition happened, and that year that I was asked to work at Graphic Studio with the visiting artists. And in the meantime, before that, I'd been working with many other artists in the studio, printing work for them, people like Chris Reed. I did wood engravings for Eric Patton and Barbara, who lives in Howth, can't remember her second name. And I learned a lot about color and mixing of color and so on from that. And then I worked with Pat Hickey, who was unwell at the time, and so he needed help in the proofing and making of the prints to some extent. And that was an extra bonus for me, because I learned very much from working through those processes with him, mixing and discussing it. And it really laid the ground for me for being able to work with visiting artists later on.
Well, that's interesting. So you actually do the printing for some artists?
Yeah, and I would get people to print mine sometimes now too, or help me even. So if I have an edition, I make my print, I have a proof, the first color proof, which is the final, how I want it to be. And then I have to print an edition. And a skilled printer, another skilled printer, can print that for you. There's no artistic kind of choices, if you like, within that. They just have to, the BAT, we call it, bonatire. So they have to get it like the print that I first produced. And there's a lot of skill in that, just the printing.
And is that where the term artist proof comes from?
Well, no, bonatire, they call it in French. We just call it kind of proof. But an artist proof, I think, would have come from when prints were commissioned by, say, a painter. Or by someone, prints were commissioned, and the artist would have been left with some proofs for themselves. We wouldn't, don't think there would have been editions really originally of prints. They were just churned out, and it's only more recently that, in the 20th century, I guess, that editions were made when artists themselves started to produce their own work, rather than publishers, if you like.
Yes.
And they wanted to add a value to it, I guess, and no limited. So I was then working for Graphic Studio, part-time manager, and working with the visiting artists. And again, this was a very important influence, I suppose, on my own work, and a huge learning experience. I mean, I did etching mostly up then, mezzotint up to then, and I'd printed wood, wood engravings and so on. And I suppose I'd done carbon, I'd done a good bit. But I suppose what happens with working with another artist, especially someone, that's Tim Gouldings, by the way. Tim is with us here today on the top left.
All right, yes.
One of my favorite artists to work with. He brings up the biscuits, what can I say? So, there are so many techniques involved with all the artists. So we have, an etching up on the top left, and gold leaf and Tim's, and actually there's one photopolymer plate in that one. We didn't go use any more in the rest of that whole series, but there was one of 4 plates there that was. The one then, Bill Crozier's, is carborundum, and used very differently to the carborundum below it, which is Donald Teskey's.
Yeah.
They can be used in such different ways. The one on the right, Mark Francis, is photopolymer. So what happens there is he does his drawing on plastic sheets, and he did many drawings, and it was wonderful working with him, I must say. And then I would expose them using onto a photo, using the photo system onto a plate, a photo intaglio plate, and then we printed those. Some of them we also used carborundum in his, and even screen printed over one of them. The one on the bottom right is a woodcut. Of quite a small print. With Mazer, we made, I think, 17 prints. So the largest woodcut was 1 meter by 1.5 meters. But we also made a lot of photo intaglio ones. We did etchings with carborundum. He used carborundum. And the one on the bottom left here, Martin Gales, is just an etching, a beautiful example of.
I thought I recognized that one.
Yeah, of Aquatins. That's a good example of a spit bite, the sky, and indeed the color in the grass.
Yes.
He gets in there into the acid room. He loves doing it, and he's great, you know.
Yeah.
But for some of these artists, like Donald, that was one, not that one, but he made his first prints in our temporary studio there in Pearse Street, and it must be very difficult. You know, we work away and for many years doing printmaking, and when we're happy with something, we put it into a gallery. But for visiting artists, they come in, they're working in front of a whole lot of skilled printmakers. It could be their first print, and they're expected to make this and have it in an exhibition. And it must be hugely challenging, even though we sometimes are a bit in awe of them when they come in. But it would be my job and Neve's to steer them through that, and we have the technical ability to give them, you know, the tools they need to do that, and they do all of the drawing and so on, and we then do the printing.
Yeah, wonderful.
So you know, working full time doesn't allow a lot of time to do your own work, and so my work then was very sporadic, maybe for the last 10 years. There are a lot of, you know, some exhibitions where I'd be invited to do something, I'd make work. This one was a series with the Olivier Cornet Gallery, and it was for Bloomsday. There were supposed to be 4 plates of prints originally. It was a group show, but I only had time to make 3. But and I started changing the different techniques I used, in part to accommodate that, but also really because it suited the work, to be honest with you. So these are straightforward photographs put onto photopolymer plates, and then an etching printed on top of that. So there would be 3 plates, but there's a combination of etching and
yes. Okay.
And then these ones here were for, again, a Bloomsday, I think the following year. Nikki was running a project called the Ulysses Haiku Project, following on a very successful exhibition she had in the lab. And she asked me to make, these are haiga. Haiga are haiku, the Japanese poem, short poem, combined with an image. And these are other people's haiku, and I was to turn them into haiga, so make a print and combine them. And what I did here was use screen print. Back to screen print, and the screen print, when I joined Graphic Studio, that screen print is what I knew, but unfortunately, due to toxicity of it, they decided to get rid of it that year. So the year I arrived, so I brought it back later, maybe I suppose it must be 6-8 years ago, into the studio. So these are sheets of copper. They have gold leaf, aluminium leaf on them, and then screen prints over those of images, and of the poems.
So you can see the copper coming through. That's the actual copper.
You can see the copper coming through. Right. The one of the doves in the bottom right. It took me, you know, I fed, they're actually pigeons, wild pigeons in the back garden. I fed them for about 3 weeks, and I had flocks of pigeons coming in and photographing about hundreds of photographs before I got the one I wanted.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see the copper there. This is an aluminium foil on the other ones, and then gold leaf, just to highlight specific aspects of the thing I wanted. Yes. So you know, this is Stephen Fry's on the right, and it's about the meeting of what's his name? Bloom, is it?
Yeah.
With his son at the end of the book. And but the imagery is imagery that I would tend to want to use, you know, and there are reasons for all of the choices within the images.
Sure.
The trees, the winter skerries, you know, I was looking for a snowy scene. I took photographs of snow in Phoenix Park. The reason I chose this is very like the work I do now, but also to see the figure on the left in among the trees. It's my
Oh, yes.
and his
Yes.
name is Ulysses. He's from Brazil, so that's one of the decisions I made. I love having little secret things in the print.
Yes, yeah, very good. Mm-hmm.
So this is the landscapes I'm kind of doing now. This one took me about 5 years, I think. It was half finished for a long time, and I struggled, and eventually I got it done recently. And I'm kind of getting back into landscape and trying to figure out what I want to do with it. And what I want to do is introduce, you see in the next one, other elements into it. So the cones are just, it's again back to going to one object, the big tree, but also introducing like a still life, other objects. And I want to, that's just me trying to learn how to do this. So I'm doing it very literally in a sense, but I'll move in closer and get objects bigger and gradually combine them over time to make a sort of a combination.
Still life. To say that's called no parking, isn't that right?
That's called no parking.
Yeah.
And this one here, as you see, I've moved in closer now. It was for an exhibition called Diamond Point, and the kite I had planned to do, and it was nice. It's always nice when you are asked to do a kind of a themed exhibition to be able to do something that is within the range of what you are doing at the moment. Otherwise, it's very hard to I think, to find something that you like.
Sure.
This is just, I put this in because, you know, throughout this, I've done all sorts of kind of maverick prints, if you like, and wings I've seemed to have always featured in my work throughout, but I've never come to terms with how I want to use them. There are two prints there, the top two, right, which, you know, I made and were in exhibitions. But apart from that, I've struggled with what I really want to do with it. The bottom middle one is, you know, it's a mono print, which I did down in the Jerome Guthrie Centre. And the one on the right, the drawing, is just, again, trying to get to terms with the subject matter.
Yes.
The top left is an unfinished print, and the bottom left is the beginnings of making of sculpture and print combined. And I have kind of ideas on how I do that. And it leads me into the final print there, because there are wings and birds in it. This is a print I made. It's not a mezzotint, though it looks like it. And I was trying to achieve that look with Aquatins and Spitbite. It was for the sponsor's portfolio. But it is a picture, is the Great Wave, by Hokusai, and folded into the shape of the swan, and then used as a subject in a print. And I want to make a series of prints now. It's my next goal, is to have an exhibition with a series of prints using origami shapes, but made from my own prints. So I'm going to do a series of prints, which on the subject matter I'm still struggling with, but I will then fold them into the birds, have the birds there, and then also have a print that incorporates the paperwork. So there will be three aspects to the one work, if you like: the original, the bird itself. I've also folded kind of copper into, or that shape, the origami, and we'll be etching them and probably making sculpture as well.
All right.
So that's the direction I'm moving in at the moment.
Robert, that was fantastic.
I've just noticed the time. I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. We'll go straight to Q&A now, and I'm going to allow people unmute themselves. But before we do that, I always ask everybody, you know, who's their favorite artist? Is there a work that you'd love to get and put over your mantelpiece, whether it's in a museum somewhere, you can lift it, you know?
Well, if I could get that Caravaggio, I'd be happy enough.
Would you now?
But it's a hard one, that. I suppose One of the artists I really admire is Yamaboshi, I think the name is. I see him on Instagram, really, Yamaboshi33. And he does these mezzotints of in just black and white. Absolutely beautiful light. It's one of the things about mezzotint and printmaking that when you're using several plates, that when I look at one plate printed on its own in black and white of a mezzotint, you get that full range of the light within the print and the capability of it. And once you start layering in color, you're taking away from that. You're reducing the tonal range. And I'd like to make prints that can keep that tonal range.
Yes.
In the work.
Yeah.
You know.
Alico says incredible work and so interesting. Thanks, Alico.
Thank you.
Millie Moore says, love learning more about printmaking. Thanks, Robert and Alan. Sorry, I need to leave now. Okay, see you, Millie. Olivier, I do have to leave for the gallery. Well done, Robert. Always a pleasure to work with you. Generations of artists owe you so much. Yes, because a lot of people have been through your hands, haven't they, in terms of
I guess,
printmaking and all that. Yeah. Liam Madden says, wow, that hour has just flown by. Fascinating insight into Robert's work and the world of printmaking. Patty says, amazing fruits, they're so real. Is that a granadilla?
It is indeed. That's what it's apparently granadilla.
Granadilla, of course it's a granadilla.
I was corrected on it.
Okay. Catherine Gagan says the Caravaggio inspired print is stunning. Yes, it is, isn't it? Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Catherine Green, I think your work is very sensitive and beautiful. Thank you for sharing all these amazing images. Thanks, Catherine. Marianne says, that looks brilliant. Graphic Studio, fantastic space and presses. I started off in the original Graphic Studio in Mount Street. I have my own press now, but what a huge improvement. Wow. Great to see.
That's gone. Who was that?
That was Marianne.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. Elaine says, what an amazing studio. Thank you very much for showing it to us. Thank you, Elaine. Bridget Connaughton, why are lithographs not popular anymore?
That's very hard to say. And there are a combination of things. I suppose lithography, well, it's an enormous stone you have to carry around. I suppose that's going to stop people.
It's hard work.
It's hard work, yeah.
I started off doing lithography and it's such hard work. I went to etching because I just couldn't cope with the stones, and John Bean was working in the Graphic Studio and he helped me, but I just couldn't cope with it. So I went to the etching, and that's easier to manage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a process that you have to go through, the whole process, rather than with etching. You can take any different technique and use it and very quickly get something. But with lithography, you have to always go through the whole process.
Paddy McGovern says, thanks and congratulations to both presenters on exceptional presentation, engaging from first to last, memorable. That's Paddy McGovern, thank you.
Thank you.
Paula says, wonderful insight into the life and the work and the chi, every good wish for the future. Tim Goulding says, marvelous breadth of work, a real master and also an intuitive teacher. And my daughter, Katie, says, amazing work, so cool to see. Thank you for showing us. Thanks, Katie. And Eilish says, superb, thank you. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And finally, Rupert Warren in Germany says, your last image, where you describe the way you want to head to with 3 layers of imagery is genius.
Thank you.
There's good praise for you. So anybody would anyone like to ask a question in person? Yes, Marianne.
The Graphic Studio, are they running any courses at the moment, or is that all stopped because of COVID?
It was stopped because of COVID, but we're starting again in September, October, I think. And we can fit in, I think 6 people at a time. So yeah, we're going back to it. We'll keep it. It'll be online.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, maybe as a beginner, I mean, is it too hard to start?
It looks it, doesn't it?
No,
a lot of work, a lot of.
Well, let the maestro answer that question.
Well, no, it's not. Again, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I find lithography, for example, I love working in lithography because you can just do a very simple drawing. But for me, I've always felt you need to be good at drawing, but that's not the case. You know, that's my personal challenge within lithography. For etching, you can ground a plate, do a simple line drawing, and get a lovely print, or even do dry point and get a lovely print very quickly with a very simple technique, you know. And woodcut is I like to think that woodcut is very, very simple to do, but extremely complex in what you can do with it, and beautiful. But it's effectively, you know, cutting the bits out that you don't want with a chisel, you know. So I suppose it's a simple thing. It's extremely skilled in how you do it eventually, but you can start at a very simple level and work your way up to that, you know.
So it could be as simple or as complex as you like.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else before we
Yeah.
today?
Hi. Sorry.
Derek.
Question.
Yes, of course, Derek.
Yeah. Wonderful program. You're a master printer, and I don't mean this as any insult, but I do Geekly. Where would you place Geekly into traditional printing?
The inkjet printing. Well, it's something new. I mean, you know, carborundum was frowned upon at one point when it came in first. It's not really been printmaking. You know, even monoprints, some people don't like. It's just a new format. It's like the photo intaglio. Again, it was new, and people had to take time to accept it. Giclée printing is inkjet printing, and if you produce your image and it is an original image and it is produced in that way for the first time and only, then it is an original print. Otherwise, it is, you know, if it's used to reproduce a painting, it's a reproduction. It's a photocopy effectively. So it depends on how you use it. It's
I would be taking the iPad, so directly from the iPad to printing it.
Yeah, your own compositions.
Yeah, all composition.
Yeah. So they're original prints, and they don't have to be editioned. That's up to you. You can edition them, or you can just print as many as you want. But I think the important thing with print is to inform people of what it is. If it were a reproduction, they need to know that. And unfortunately, I think that's what mixes people up, that there are editioned prints which are called just edition prints when they're actually editioned reproductions, you know. So the clarity of what it is really important, I think, just for the person getting it.
Okay, thanks, Derek. I suppose, you know, it's a bit like David Hockney and working on his iPad, and that took a while of getting used to.
Yeah, I mean, but
some people.
Like somebody said to me, we make marks on paper, and that's what art is, and it doesn't have to be in paper, of course.
No.
I've added that how you get it there is your own business, you know. But you know, you need to be clear to the person who buys it.
Who buys it? Yes.
Likes to know what it is, I guess.
Sure. Catherine Green says, "Do you keep your original drawings, or do you work directly on the plate?"
I would sometimes work directly, more often work directly on the plate. But I do a lot of very detailed drawings, like the fruit, for example. I would have got dark brown paper and drawn with chalks and did quite detailed drawings of them.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose because I was getting into that, what I was trying to get to, and it was a better way than, you know, like the landscapes. I ran through loads of them by just drawing. But with a mezzotint plate, you can't do that. So you have to be more thought out. And when you're making, I suppose, multi-layered plates, drawing gives you an option. It gives you the opportunity to decide what's going on each plate and divide it up, where the colors go and so on. So it really varies. I keep the drawings. There aren't really a lot of drawings that I have that I would ever do anything with, other than occasionally move around the drawer, you know.
Well, I know from memory, Catherine does a lot of drawings, but they're kind of shoved away. They're never shown as such. They're merely a means to the final work, which is the sculpture. Yeah. Okay, listen, we're gone over time a fair bit, so I think we'll wrap it up for today. Robert, thank you so much for bringing us into your workspace there in your home, and also into Graphic Studio. You have me intrigued with the whole subject, and it's something I'm really going to be interested in looking at further. You know, it's an area I literally know nothing about.
Yeah.
But you made it sound so interesting and fascinating. I have to do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of other people think the same, you know.
After COVID, we'll have to have you in there, actually. And
I'd love to do that.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. So look, thank you so much for your time and for showing us all the work that you've done. It's been an amazing trip. Thank you.
Absolutely amazing.
Now, yeah, thanks again, everybody. Thanks all of you for watching from as far away as Australia, over in Canada as well. It's tremendous to see you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. Now, next week, we have an artist who's a photographer, and she's a most interesting woman. She has documented the lives of Centre City folk in Dublin, and has done some extraordinary exhibitions with her work, and I think you'll find it fascinating. So that'll be next Saturday, 10 o'clock, same time, same place, and I hope you'll join me then. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching, and a special thanks to Robert. Cheers now, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.